How to motivate a teen and why we're looking at this backwards. Hey, it's Heather Chauvin, wife, mother of 3 boys, former social worker, dreamer, recovering rescuer, stage 4 cancer survivor. I started my motherhood journey when I was 18. I was single and living off government assistance. Beyond all of these titles and labels, I'm a human being, just like you, attempting to navigate it all while feeling good. My goal on this podcast is to show you that you can live an energized, sustainable life both at home and in your work. On this show, I attempt to keep it real with stories, interviews, and random thoughts. This is not a business or career podcast, and it's not a parenting podcast. It's both and so much more. You will laugh, you will cry, and maybe even get a little frustrated with the truth you've been hiding from yourself. I believe all human behavior is a language, whether it's through your child's behavior, your health, or a relationship. And when we learn to listen instead of react, we begin to understand what it truly means to feel alive and in control. If you haven't already, go grab a copy of my book, Dying to Be a Good Mother. You can purchase it wherever books are sold online. And if you're interested in how to integrate this work into your life and get quicker results, you can learn more about my mastery and mastery business coaching experiences at heatherchauvin.com/work with me. Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/work with me. And you have a personal question or a topic you'd like me to answer on this podcast, then text me 313-710-5199. 313-710-5199. All right, let's change your life. Let's dig in. Hey everyone. Okay, today is Tuesday, so therefore you get a personal podcast from me. And today I'm going to talk about my personal experience raising a teenager. I like to change the stories a little bit just for my son's identity and privacy and all of that, but utilizing myself as a coach, as a mother, as a human being, constantly growing and evolving when it comes to relationships, because that's all parenting is. It's a relationship. So I haven't done a podcast on raising a teen in a long time. And if you're not familiar, my children are 16, almost 12, and 9. And it was when I became a mother 16 years ago, that was my first cracking. That was my first aha moment. That was actually my my first rock bottom. And I realized that when I became a mother, I never wanted my child to feel the way that I felt. And there's so much that I could talk about in one episode, and I definitely go deeper into it in my book, Dying to Be a Good Mother. I talk about it on previous podcasts, especially parenting podcasts. If you go to my website, actually, heatherchauvin.com/podcast, we have a category tag. So if you look under it and you put like parenting, you'll see the ones that are parenting related or relationships or money, leadership, mindset, things like that. So if you're looking specifically for parenting podcasts, go to heatherchauvin.com/podcast. So I want to talk about, I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm experiencing as a mother, but also, really talking about how to raise a motivated teen. And I want to be mindful that I'm recording this, I want to say in the middle of a pandemic, but we're still post-pandemic world. And I really don't think a lot is going to change in the next 3 to 5 years. I think we're just going to slowly, gradually make our way out of this. But I also feel like, just like any other historical period, I think it's going to shift our perception. It's going to shift how our children have grown up. And I think it's going to make a big impact on
post-traumatic stress and also post-pandemic stress. I was actually recently volunteering with a local organization. I volunteer once in a while because my passion and love is helping children and teens thrive. And I was working with these teens, and I asked the coordinator what the biggest hurdle was for them. And she said they've all started high school in the middle of a pandemic, and they've lost a lot of their social skills. And these kids are also growing up in a time that I did not have when I grew up, when I was in high school, which is cell phones. And so the cell phone is the comfort zone, right? So we're living in a technology world that has, there's beauty to that, and then there's contrast to that. And then we are also living in a world where we are isolated, like literally isolated. And as we're going back out into the world, yes, there's rules, there's regulations, there's all of that, but we also can't forget what they just went through, right? And so there's a lot going on for our kids. It doesn't matter what age they are. And so we have to be mindful of that. They are experiencing a lot of emotional disruption. And they are experiencing that in their own bubble. But then we are experiencing our own emotional disruption, our own stressors, our own spiritual journey through the relationship that we're having with our children. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm experiencing as a mother of a teen, and also what I know, my perception of what my son is experiencing, because I could never talk for him. I actually might have him on the show. And if you want me to have him on the show, I think he would do it. But I would like to know if you do. So send me a message on Instagram, what questions you would want me to ask him. So you can find me at Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN, or send me a text message, 313-710-5199. I'm not kidding. I'm literally wondering if that is my freaking phone number. This is hilarious. I'm going to tell you, let me get it. 1 second. 313. Oh my God. Yeah, I was right. 313-710-5199. So you can send me a text there. Let me know what questions you have about raising a teen, and I'll ask him and we'll go from there. Okay. So my son is 16, almost 17, and he is a fabulous human. He's an amazing kid. Young adults. Is that even a young adult? Whatever. He's an amazing soul having a human experience. And he has been, the light of my life. He's what has chronically kicked my ass. He's always been on the forefront of all the learning that I do. He was a big part of my why for getting started. My why has shifted many, many times. Now I am just really motivated to help women thrive, help humans thrive. My why always shifts. And watching all three of my boys struggle in their own way and navigate life in their own way. And they're three very different people. So Logan, the oldest, he just bought his first car. And this has been one of the things that he's been highly motivated to drive. Where we live, I know not everyone, where everyone lives, driving is a thing or a big thing, but where we live, you have to get around by vehicle. Public transport is just not very popular here, public transportation. And so it's just normal for, kids to get their beginners and then drive solo, blah, blah, blah. So this has been the one thing that I've really watched him be highly motivated to do. And it's interesting because, a conversation about education and, how his brain works, that's a whole other podcast. But I've watched this spark of wanting independence and wanting to get, to grow. So I've used that as leverage, as what I would call currency, right? So the reason why I'm saying it like this is because I want you to, a child, a teenager, I want you to watch and observe what their currency is. I would say most children these days, Wi-Fi is a currency, meaning just like you go to work and you get a paycheck, the money is your currency. That's why you're working for it. So when you're trying to motivate a child to do anything, you have to watch what lights them up, right? Sometimes, yes, sometimes it's candy, but also like, do they love Legos? Do they love drawing? Like, what really lights them up? And I find that the older children get, especially when there's trauma involved, stressors, life stressors involved, they're going to numb, right? They're going to numb. And sometimes that is with drugs and alcohol. And sometimes that is with technology, like their phone, staying in their room, doing all these things. And some of them are normal behaviors. But as a parent, it's your job. Yes, I understand that you have to pay the bills and you have to work and do all these other things. And it's there's a lot on your plate. I get that. But when we want to create a connection with our children and we want to really make relationship a priority, you have to understand and be curious about what that other child wants and desires. And sometimes they won't communicate that to you because they just don't know how to communicate that to you. So I was watching my son's behavior. I always say behavior is a language. So I was watching his behavior, and his behavior was that he really wanted a car. So if you remember buying your first big item, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You really don't know. They don't teach you these things in school. And so it's really about having that relationship to be able to sit down and to help your child navigate this. And so I've been observing how resistant he is to getting help, like asking for help, because he has pride, right? He wants to make me proud. He wants to make us proud. He's like, I got this. I can do it myself. So I was like, great, awesome. So he went out, he bought his first car with his own money that he's been saving for years and years of, jobs and whatever. And so he got this car, and the whole time we're co-creating in conversation about, okay, how much is insurance, right? So go get an insurance quote. Okay, realistically, how much is it going to cost you in gas, right? Like, what are your other bills that you have to pay? And so starting these conversations about budget, right? Having these just heart-to-heart conversations. And I've been watching my son go through the emotional guidance scale. We talk a lot about this inside my mastery program, and also the drama triangle. So the rescuer, the persecutor, the victim. And you've heard me talk about this, the zones a lot, the red, green, and yellow zones. So what I've noticed is he'll go to a red zone. He's like, I don't want to talk about this, right? And he'll get in an argument and blah, blah, blah. And I just won't engage in arguments with any human. So what I do is I say, hey, I see you're frustrated. Let's talk about this later. And then I always come back to the conversation. I never drop the conversation. I make a little note and I'm like, we're going to talk about this later. So then the next day we talk about it. I'm like, hey, okay, let's talk about money, right? And so all these triggering topics like money, resistance, fear, I'm watching him go numb, or I'm watching him like zone out. And so sometimes they're 5 to 10 minute conversations, and it's like pushing through the muck, right? Pushing through the muck. And so every day or once a week, I'm like, let's sit down, let's talk about this, because I can't be triggered by his emotional reaction to wanting to be independent. And so the funny thing is he's constantly mirroring back, he's just a human, constantly mirroring back my own resistance, my own fears, my own perfectionism. But I just always ask myself, if you don't get anything else from today's conversation, I always ask myself this: am I the adult that I needed at his age? Am I the adult that I needed at his age? Meaning, in that moment, if I can put myself in his shoes, okay, I'm buying my first car. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just throwing money at the wall. Like, how do I budget? I don't even know what questions to ask. So what type of adult did you need in that moment? Did you need somebody who wanted to pick a fight for you? Did you need somebody who was like, hey, let's just have, short consistent conversations over and over and over again? Did you need somebody that wouldn't put up with your bullshit? Somebody that was like, hey, I see you're frustrated. Be frustrated, but I'm not tolerating it, right? Who did you need that person to be at your child's age? And then the second thing I really want you to walk away from this is your child's currency. So understanding what gets them ticking. A lot of people send me messages on Instagram or via text, and they're asking questions about their children. And they're saying, how do I get my teen to be motivated? How do I get them to do this? How do I get them to do that? And my first question to you is, what motivates you? What inspires you? Because oftentimes we've been so brainwashed culturally that there's something wrong with our children. And you know what? That may be true. That there may be a chemical imbalance, but their brain is also growing at a very rapid pace. A very rapid pace. And what we don't realize is that not only is it growing at a rapid pace, but they are not an adult. They say like the frontal lobe, or I believe, don't quote me, I'm not a freaking scientist, the frontal lobe of the brain is not complete until you're 25, or brain development in general. And there's so much science and research that is coming out talking about even dementia and Alzheimer's and how we can heal our brain. So oftentimes we're seeking diagnosis, or we're seeking what is wrong, what is wrong, what is wrong. But no, like, what is right? What is right with your child? That if you're noticing this lack of motivation, or you're noticing this lack of desire, maybe it's just they're numb. Maybe they haven't found their thing. You know what? Maybe they are literally sitting in a pool of anxiety and they don't know how to manage it. That was my case when I was a teenager. I was sitting in a pool of anxiety, and I'm still an anxious person. People don't think I am, but I have anxiety. I had anxiety this morning. I feel very raw and vulnerable. I'll also talk about that in a second. But I didn't understand what anxiety was. I didn't know how to feel my feelings. I didn't know how to manage my emotional body. And so if you don't understand how to manage your emotional body, you sit in it and you become very depressed. You become very low on the emotional guidance scale. So it's things like saying, like when you are developing these habits, like, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's go for a run. Oh, I don't want to. Hey, if you come for a walk, we'll turn the internet on. I'll go buy you the shit food that you want. I'll go buy you something that you want. Come for a walk with me. Sometimes you got to use their currency to get the energy flowing. So this car situation has been such a beautiful, because it's been my son's currency. It's been such a beautiful and motivating way to teach him about life skills, about budgeting, about motivation, about like, okay, how much money do you need to make? And I'm telling you right now, the only reason why I have the confidence to be able to teach him this shit is because I had to teach it myself as an adult. So when you're sitting in it and you're feeling helpless, like, I don't know how to help you budget, it's like, you got to learn that skill yourself, or you hire somebody. You're like, you know what? I actually don't know how to do this. I know nothing about cars. So let's go to somebody that we know. Unfortunately, my husband knows about cars. But if he didn't, or if I was single, I would say, who in our life knows about cars? And I would go to that person. I'd be like, I need your help. Or I would go to the place with him and I would ask questions. You have to learn to co-create these things with your children, but using what motivates them as currency and learning opportunities. This is homeschooling. This is creating educational opportunities for your children. So there's that. And that's the child's perspective of how to motivate your child. But I always want to talk about what's going on within you. So I have actually found this period in parenting the most difficult, emotionally. I think when my children were little, the sleep deprivation is horrific. And if I could go back in time, the first thing I would have invested in is a sleep coach. And I want to gift sleep coaching to every new mom, because I feel like it doesn't matter what the hell you're feeding your kids. Sleep is so essential. And as an adult, I've become very boundaried with my sleep. I will leave parties. I will leave events. I will, create. I will not do things because of the time, because I want sleep. Sleep and restoration, so freaking important. And I also have really good boundaries around that in our house too, even for the teenager, because I just think it's so, so, so important for restoration. Your brain health, your mental health, your emotional health, everything is so affected by your sleep. But what I'm finding really challenging as a mother to a teenager is when we are triggered, it brings up our stuff that we were experiencing at the exact same age as our child that we have not healed. And then also, when your child is old enough to, one, go out in the world by themselves, your biggest fears come out, right? The fear of the unknown, the fear of certainty, the fear of safety, and you want to control. And if you don't have the self-awareness, what happens is we start yelling. We're angry. We're frustrated because we're afraid. And so I've watched myself sit with two emotions. I've watched myself sit with grief and sadness of losing the younger years, and then also this extreme excitement and watching him grow. And nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about the grief in motherhood. Nobody talks about the grief in parenting. And then, you have empathy for your own parents. And sometimes I've actually said this to my mom and my dad. I've texted my dad. I'm like, how the hell did you deal with this? And he's like, yep, it only gets worse. And then you think, maybe some of those behaviors that were so triggered in our own parents, maybe that is their way of grieving. Maybe that's their way of, masking their vulnerability and their emotion. Because we're all here to learn and grow, and being human is a spiritual experience. And it's very difficult to watch your children grow up. There is a deep sadness in that. And then sometimes there's relief because you're like, oh, I can catch my breath. I can get a good night's sleep. I can go do this. I can go do that. So I'm always here to shake things up and to talk about, yes, how can we get our children to, but also understand that it's not as simple as a 6-step strategy. There's the emotional inner work that we're doing to grieve and let go and watch our children bloom and go out into the world and sit with the sadness and the grief and the overwhelm. And then we can also sit with the joy and the excitement, and we can help them grow. We can give them the tools and strategies that we never got, that we never received. And, this is more confirmation that the more work I do on myself, it is not taking away from anybody. Because when I'm discovering what freedom looks like for me, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, I get to gift that to my children so that they get to choose what freedom looks like for them. And so we can hold the parallels of watching them grow and go out into the world, and also watching ourselves grow and go out into the world. So I hope you took away something today on my ramble of how to motivate a teen. And I want to know what else you want me to talk about when it comes to raising teens, when it comes to raising middle schoolers. It's definitely interesting watching my boys grow. The youngest is 9, and I'm now out of that baby toddler phase and, really understanding their behavior. And I noticed that when they were younger, it was really more about me and emotional regulation and watching them bloom and kind of learning to see and accept the child for who they are as they're trying to navigate who they are in the world. And then they get to this point where they've kind of like put their stake in the ground of who they are. And again, you're still doing another layer of acceptance. And then it gets to this point where you're watching a little delicate flower just go out into the world, and you're like terrified of that flower getting crushed. And it always reminds me of the importance of love and compassion and kindness, that we can still hold boundaries. We can still respect ourselves. We can still be respectful towards others. And I see everybody's behavior, regardless if it's that mean person that you met in the coffee shop, or that person that had road rage, or, your boss who maybe has some weird, leadership, old school leadership style that is just like, hey, like, who are you trying to be, dad? Like, okay, you're not scary. Like, I'm a human. Be more loving and compassionate. This is leadership. And when you start navigating your whole life differently, you start parenting differently. You start running your business differently. You start working differently. All your relationships change. So I want to know what your takeaway was. Send me a message, 313-710-5199. If you want to text me, it's an American phone number. Or send me a DM on Instagram at Heather Chauvin.
Well, that's it. And I wanted to thank you for listening today, because I truly believe you are exactly where you need to be. And now I have a favor to ask. In exchange for the value you've gained from this free podcast, I'd be forever grateful if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Share the show with at least one woman in your life who you feel would benefit, and or take a screenshot and share it on social media. And always feel free to tag me at Heather Chauvin. The world does not benefit from your guilt and fatigue. The world needs more women who are willing to unlearn everything they've been taught. Women who are courageous enough to feel good and not let guilt run the show. I believe you are that courageous woman. To see if my community and coaching is the right fit for you and your big vision, the relationships you desire, the money, time, energy that you know deep down you are capable of creating, then head on over to heatherchauvin.com/work with me. That's Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/work with me, and take the next step in the right direction. Taking a stand for how you feel means you are taking a stand for how your children show up as adults. And if you have a personal question or topic you'd like me to answer on the podcast, text me 313-710-5199. 313-710-5199. You are so worthy of feeling good. Now go do some scary shit.